The autumn wind whispered through the bare branches of the park, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke from neighborhood chimneys. It was Thanksgiving evening in the quiet town of Eldridge Hollow, where families gathered around tables laden with turkey and pie, their laughter echoing like a warm hearth. But on a weathered park bench beneath a flickering street lamp, an elderly woman sat alone, her elegant frame hunched against the chill. Margot Hale, with silver hair pinned neatly despite the disarray of her wool coat, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Tears traced silent paths down her lined cheeks, her shoulders trembling not just from the cold, but from a deeper ache that no fire could touch. She clutched her small leather purse like a lifeline, her knuckles white as if it held the last remnants of a life slipping away. No one passed by. The streets were empty, the world feasting while she faded into invisibility. Trent Diesel Navarro throttled down his Harley as he cruised the empty roads, the low rumble of the engine cutting through the holiday hush. At 45, he was a man forged in the fires of lost battles. Scars from a decade in the military hidden under his leather cut, emblazoned with the iron promise patch that bound him to his brothers. The club wasn't just ink and chrome. It was a vow, etched in blood and brotherhood after the war, that took his best friend and left him with ghosts that rode shotgun on every mile. Thanksgiving meant little to him anymore. No family to call his own, just the open road and the crew's annual ride to remember the fallen. But tonight, something pulled him off course, a detour through the park that felt less like chance and more like fate's gravelly whisper. He spotted her from across the green, a solitary figure under the lamp's golden glow. Slowing to a stop, Trent killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the soft sobs that carried on the breeze. Dismounting with the ease of a man who'd logged 1,000 sunsets on 2 wheels, he approached cautiously, his boots crunching on frost-kissed grass. The air smelled of damp earth and her faint perfume, lavender faded but defiant. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough like engine gravel, yet gentle as he removed his helmet. "You all right? It's getting cold out here." Margot looked up, her blue eyes sharp despite the tears, framed by the fine lines of a woman who'd once commanded rooms with a glance. She straightened slightly, wiping her face with a dignity that spoke of better days. "I'm fine, young man, just taking in the evening." But her voice cracked, and her grip on the purse tightened, as if afraid he'd pry it away. Trent didn't push. He'd seen enough hollow assurances in foxholes to know when someone was carrying more than they let on. He shrugged off his riding jacket, the leather warm from his body heat, and draped it over her shoulders. "Name's Trent. Looks like you could use this more than me. What's got you out here on a night like this?" She hesitated, the weight of unspoken words pressing down like the gathering dusk. The park was still, save for the distant hum of a television from a nearby home, spilling out snippets of football cheers. Margot's hands trembled as she accepted the jacket, pulling it close. "It's foolish, really. I don't have a place to go tonight. My home, it's gone, sold out from under me by kin who forgot what family means." Her words hung heavy, laced with a shame that twisted Trent's gut. He sat on the bench's edge, giving her space, the cold seeping through his flannel shirt. No pity in his eyes, just the quiet resolve of a man who'd promised himself long ago never to look away from the broken. As the street lamp buzzed softly overhead, Margot's story unraveled in fragments, like pages torn from an old diary. She'd built a life in Eldridge Hollow, widowed young, raising a son alone through lean years and quiet triumphs. Her home, a modest Victorian on Maple Street, was her sanctuary, filled with memories etched into every creaky floorboard. But her son Harlan had returned after years away, his eyes hungry not for reunion, but for what he could claim. Greed had poisoned the blood tie. He'd forged papers, whispered lies to lawyers about her failing mind, and sold the house to developers eyeing the town's edge for condos. Now, at 78, she wandered with only her purse, a few heirloom jewels, a deed that meant nothing, and the sting of betrayal. "They said I was a burden," she murmured, staring at the purse's clasp. "But it's the other way around. I raised him to be better." Trent listened, the wind tugging at his hair, the scent of pine from the nearby woods mingling with the metallic tang of his bike's cooling exhaust. Rage simmered low in his chest, not the hot flash of fists, but the cold burn of injustice that had driven him to the iron promise. Back in the desert sands, he'd sworn to his fallen brother Jax to stand for the voiceless, to honor the promises that war stripped away. This woman, with her unyielding grace amid ruin, stirred that oath like embers fanned to flame. "You ain't a burden, ma'am. Sounds like they forgot what honor costs." He stood, offering a calloused hand. "Come on. My crew's got a fire going at the old warehouse. Warm food, no questions. Least I can do." Margot searched his face, seeing not a stranger, but a flicker of the decency the world had nearly ground out of him. She nodded, taking his hand, her steps frail but steady as they walked toward the Harley. The engine roared back to life, a thunderous heartbeat against the night's quiet, and Trent eased her onto the passenger seat, her purse secure in her lap. As they rode through the twilight streets, lights from holiday windows blurring into streaks of gold, he felt the pull of something ancient, a promise unspoken, yet binding. Little did he know, this detour would summon his brothers, unravel a web of corruption, and redefine what gratitude truly meant. Not feasts shared, but chains broken in the name of the forgotten. The warehouse loomed on the town's outskirts, a relic of rusted steel and shadowed corners where the iron promise gathered. Flickering bonfires cast dancing shadows on the walls, the air thick with the aroma of roasting venison and fresh bread. The crew's ritual against the world's indifference. Trent parked, helping Margot down, her eyes widening at the sight of 24 bikers in cuts and jeans, their faces weathered like his own. Big Mike, the club's grizzled sergeant-at-arms, approached with a nod, his massive frame blocking the wind. "Who's the guest, Diesel? Trouble?" "No trouble," Trent replied, his arms steady around Margot's shoulders. "Just a lady who needs a seat at the table." The group parted, murmurs rippling like gravel under tires as they led her to the fire's edge. Stories flowed then, tales of lost homes and reclaimed roads, the bikers sharing nods of understanding. Margot warmed her hands, the purse loosening in her grip. And for the first time that night, a small smile touched her lips, but as the flames crackled, Trent caught her glance toward the darkness, a shadow of fear lingering. Harlan's greed wasn't done. Whispers of threats, of watchers in the night hinted at deeper rot. By midnight, as the crew settled into watches, Trent pulled Big Mike aside, the fire's glow etching lines on their faces. "She's family now," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of their club's creed. "We ride for her tomorrow. Find out who pulled the strings on that sale." Mike clapped his shoulder, the bond sealing like hot lead. In the quiet hours, Trent stood vigil, the promise taking root. Redemption wasn't for the mighty, but for those the world tried to erase. And as dawn's first light kissed the horizon, the engines would stir, ready to honor what blood alone couldn't. The first rays of dawn crept over Eldridge Hollow like a hesitant promise, painting the warehouse walls in hues of pale gold and lingering shadow. The air hung heavy with the remnants of the night's fire, smoky embers and the faint earthy tang of cooling metal from the bikes lined up like silent sentinels. Trent stood at the edge of the gravel lot, his breath visible in the crisp morning chill, watching as Margot Hale stirred from the cot they'd set up for her inside. She'd slept fitfully, her silver hair tousled, but the warmth of the space and the low hum of brotherhood had eased the lines of exhaustion from her face. The purse rested beside her, unyielding as ever, a silent guardian of secrets yet to unfold. Big Mike lumbered over, his boots thudding softly on the packed earth. a thermos of black coffee steaming in his massive hand. At 52, Mike was the anchor of the Iron Promise, his broad shoulders bearing the scars of bar fights and battlefield regrets. "Crew's revving up, Diesel," he rumbled, handing over the thermos. "Razor's already scouting the town records office, says he'll charm the clerk or bluff his way in. But this lady, she got a name for that snake of a son." Trent took a sip, the bitter heat grounding him as he glanced back toward the warehouse door. "Harlan Hale. Lives out on the edge of town now. Fancy place with a view he didn't earn. Margot says he cut her out clean. Power of attorney, some shady lawyer twisting the rules." The words tasted like ash, stirring memories of his own fractured past. The letter from Jax's widow, the empty promises of a government that turned its back on the broken. Trent had ridden away from that life, finding solace in the club's code, a vow to protect what the world discarded. Now that vow extended to this woman, fragile yet fierce, who'd lost her anchor to greed. Inside, the crew gathered around a makeshift table scarred from years of maps and ale mugs. Razor, the lanky intel guy with tattoos snaking up his arms like forgotten roads, pored over a crumpled notepad, his fingers stained with ink. "Victorian on Maple? Yeah, that's prime real estate now. Developers from the city, some outfit called Horizon Builds. Harlan signed it over last month, but the deeds got holes. Smells like coercion." His voice was low, edged with the quiet fury of a man who'd once been a cop before the badge soured him. Margot emerged then, Trent's jacket still draped over her shoulders like a borrowed shield. The crew fell silent, their eyes respectful, no judgments in the dim light filtering through cracked windows. She moved with the poise of someone who'd faced down harder storms, settling into a chair with a nod of thanks. "You all, this isn't necessary. Harlan's my blood, he'll come around." But her voice wavered, the lie thin as morning mist. Trent knelt beside her, his presence steady as an idling engine. "Blood don't mean loyalty, ma'am. We know that better than most. Tell us more, anything that don't sit right." As the sun climbed higher, casting long beams across the concrete floor, Margot's words flowed like a river breaking a dam. The purse opened at last, revealing not just jewels glinting dully, a locket with faded photos, a ring etched with vows, but papers, yellowed and folded tight. "He visited 2 weeks back," she said, her fingers tracing the edges. "Eyes like a stranger's. Said the house was too much for me, that he'd take care of everything. But I saw the men lurking, suits from the city, measuring the lot while I was at the market." The air thickened with her recounting, the forged signature on a medical form claiming her unfit, the lawyer's office in a strip mall that reeked of cheap cologne and false assurances. Harlan hadn't just sold the house, he'd erased her, turning sanctuary into profit. The crew leaned in, the scent of motor oil and fresh dew mingling with the gravity of her tale. Little Jax, named for Trent's lost brother, paced near the door, his young face hardened beyond his 28 years. "We ride quiet," he said, cracking his knuckles. "No noise till we got proof. But if that developer's corrupt, we expose it clean, truth over fists." Nods rippled through the group, the Iron Promise's creed binding them. Honor the fallen, shield the overlooked. Trent felt it coil in his chest, a familiar tension, like the throttle under his grip before a long haul. By mid-morning, engines growled to life outside, a symphony of low rumbles echoing off the warehouse walls. Trent helped Margot onto a sidecar rig borrowed from the club's elder, her hands steadying on the worn leather. The convoy formed, 15 bikes strong, cutting through the waking town like shadows on the wind. Eldridge Hollow stirred slowly, curtains twitching as families nursed coffee and leftovers, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing. They headed first to the old Victorian on Maple Street, its porch light still flickering from the night before. As if mourning its own abandonment, The house stood defiant amid scaffolding and yellow tape, the once vibrant garden trampled under bootprints. Margot stepped forward, the gravel crunching under her sensible shoes, and touched the doorframe. "This was our life," she whispered, the wood cool against her palm. Trent scanned the street, spotting a pickup idling at the corner, too casual, too watchful. "Eyes on us," he murmured to Mike, who revved his bike in warning. No confrontation yet. They documented it all. Photos snapped on a burner phone, notes on the rushed permits that bypassed town council nods. As they rode on to the lawyer's office, the sun warmed the air, carrying hints of pine and distant rain. Inside the sterile waiting room, papered in faded beige, Razor worked his magic, flashing a fake badge, spinning a tale of inherited claims. The receptionist, flustered under his gaze, pulled files that confirmed the rot. Harlan's signature, witnessed by a clerk with ties to Horizon Builds. Back outside, the crew regrouped in an alley, the brick walls echoing their hushed plans. "Harlan's at his new digs now," Razor said, checking a map. "We pay a visit, talk sense into him before the suits bury this deeper." Trent mounted his Harley, Margot secure behind him, her arms light around his waist. The engine's vibration thrummed through them, a pulse of resolve. But as they peeled out, a black sedan trailed at a distance, its tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. The web tightened, corruption not just in family, but woven into the town's veins. Trent glanced back, meeting Margot's gaze in the side mirror. In her eyes, he saw not fear, but a spark reignited. This ride wasn't just for justice. It was redemption's first mile, a promise pulling them toward the fire that would test them all. The afternoon stretched, shadows lengthening as they approached Harlan's address, a sprawling ranch house on the hill, overlooking the hollow like a conqueror's throne. The air grew tense, laced with the scent of impending storm clouds rolling in from the west. Trent killed the engine at the gate, the silence amplifying the distant call of a crow. "Stay close," he told Margot, his hand on her shoulder. Whatever lay beyond that door, the iron promise would face it, not with rage, but with the unyielding truth of those who'd chosen family over fortune. And in that choice, the real feast of gratitude began to unfold. The gravel crunched under Trent's boots as he dismounted at the wrought-iron gate of Harlan Hale's ranch house, the metal bars casting long, jagged shadows across the driveway in the fading afternoon light. The air had thickened with the promise of rain, carrying the sharp, metallic scent of ozone mixed with the earthy musk of the hillside grass bending under the wind. The convoy of bikes idled behind him like a pack of watchful wolves, engines purring low, exhaust curling in lazy wisps that blurred the horizon. Margot clung to the sidecar's edge, her face pale but set, the borrowed jacket enveloping her like armor forged from unexpected kindness. The black sedan had peeled off a mile back, vanishing into a side road, but Trent felt its presence lingering, a ghost in the rear view. Big Mike pulled up beside him, his massive frame blocking the wind, a toothpick clenched between his teeth. "Place screams new money," he muttered, eyeing the manicured lawn and the oversized windows that gleamed like cold eyes. "Harlan's living high while his ma starves on a bench. Makes my blood boil." Trent nodded, his jaw tight, the familiar coil of restrained fury tightening in his gut. This wasn't about vengeance. The iron promise rode for truth, for the quiet justice that mended what greed had torn. He'd made that vow in the dust-choked aftermath of his last deployment, Jax's dog tags heavy around his neck, promising to stand where others fell silent. Margot's story had reignited it, turning a holiday detour into a reckoning. They pushed through the gate, the hinges creaking like a warning, and approached the front door flanked by stone lions that seemed to snarl in the dimming sun. Razor hung back with the others, snapping discreet photos, his lanky form melting into the tree line. Little Jax flanked Trent, his young eyes sharp, hands flexing as if itching for a fight he knew better than to start. Margot walked between them, her steps measured, the purse swinging lightly at her side, now lighter, its secrets shared, but its weight undiminished. The porch light flicked on prematurely, bathing them in a harsh yellow glow, and the door swung open before Trent could knock. Harlan Hale stood there, mid-40s, slicked hair and a pressed shirt that screamed boardroom over bloodline. His eyes widened at the sight of the bikers, then narrowed on Margot, a flicker of surprise giving way to calculated calm. "Mother, what is this circus?" His voice was smooth, laced with the false warmth of a salesman, but Trent caught the edge, the tremor of a man cornered by his own shadows. The air inside wafted out, rich with the scent of roasted turkey leftovers and cinnamon from a pie cooling on a distant counter, a mocking echo of the holiday Margot had spent alone. She stepped forward, chin lifted, the lines of her face etched deeper in the light. "Harlan, we need to talk about the house, about what you've done." Her words hung steady, no plea, just the quiet authority of a mother reclaiming her voice. Harlan's gaze darted to Trent, sizing him up, the leather cut, the scars peeking from rolled sleeves, like a threat he could dismiss. "This isn't your business, whoever you are. She's confused. The doctors said so. I did what was best." But his hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles paling, betraying the lie. Trent moved closer, his presence a wall of unyielding calm, the faint scent of road dust and engine oil clinging to him. Name's Trent Navarro, and confusion's what got her out on that bench last night, crying in the cold while you feast here. We got the papers, Harlan, the forged ones, the rushed sale to Horizon Builds. That ain't best. That's theft wrapped in legalese. The words landed like gravel in a quiet engine, low and inexorable. Behind him, the crew shifted, boots scuffing the porch, a subtle reminder of the brotherhood at his back, men who'd chosen loyalty over convenience, family over fortune. Harlan's face flushed, the mask slipping as he glanced over his shoulder into the house where shadows moved. Perhaps a wife, or worse, the suits from the city. "You don't understand. The town's changing. That old place was a money pit. I was protecting her from herself." But Margot shook her head, tears welling not from weakness, but from the raw ache of betrayal laid bare. "Protecting? You sold my life for a view, Harlan. The locket from your father, the garden we planted together, gone for condos and commissions." She held up the purse, the papers peeking out like accusations. The wind picked up, rattling the wind chimes on the porch, a discordant melody underscoring the fracture. Little Jax stepped in, his voice even, but edged with the steel of shared scars. "We ain't here to drag you out, but the truth's got a way of riding out. Horizon's got ties to the mayor's office, kickbacks, bypassed inspections. You signed that deed knowing it was wrong, or you a pawn too?" Harlan recoiled, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, the scent of his cologne turning cloying in the tension. For a moment the air stilled, the distant rumble of thunder echoing the storm in his eyes. Then a phone buzzed inside, shrill and insistent, breaking the standoff. He answered it hastily, his back to them, a voice dropping to whispers that carried fragments. "They're here. No, handle it. The deal closes tomorrow." Trent exchanged a glance with Mike, the pieces slotting like gears in a well-oiled machine. Corruption ran deeper than family greed. Harlan was entangled, a thread in a larger web, threatening to swallow Eldridge Hollow whole. As Harlan turned back, feigning composure, Trent placed a hand on Margot's arm. "This ends today one way or another. Iron promise don't break oaths. Neither should sons." The words were a vow, binding the moment, the crew's engines revving faintly in the distance like a heartbeat quickening. They didn't force their way in. That wasn't their code. Instead, Trent nodded to Margot, who met her son's gaze one last time, the silence between them heavier than any shout. "Come home when you're ready to remember who we are," she said softly, turning away with the grace of unbroken spirit. The group retreated to the bikes, mounting up as rain began to spit from the clouds, pattering on leather and metal. Harlan watched from the doorway, his silhouette framed in light. But Trent saw the crack, the doubt seeded, the promise of redemption hovering like the storm's edge. As they rode down the hill, the convoy weaving through the first fat drops, Trent felt the pull tighten. The black sedan reappeared in the mirror, tailing closer now, its wipers slashing rhythmically. Razor signaled from his bike, confirming the plates traced to Horizon's fleet. The ride back to the warehouse would be shadowed, plans forming in the wet gleam of headlights. Margot leaned into the wind, her hand on Trent's back, a silent thanks that spoke volumes. In the iron promise, family wasn't born. It was forged in rides like this, through rain and resolve, chasing justice 1 mile at a time. The real battle loomed, not in fists, but in unraveling the lies that bound the innocent, and in doing so, healing the scars that time couldn't erase. Rain lashed the convoy like a relentless accusation as they descended the hillside, the black sedan's headlights piercing the downpour like accusatory eyes in the rearview mirror. Trent gripped the throttle tighter, the Harley's engine growling defiance against the storm's fury, water sluicing off his leathers in cold rivulets that traced the scars on his knuckles. The air whipped past, thick with the scent of wet asphalt and pine, the hillside blurring into a watercolor of greys and greens under the relentless sky. Margot held steady in the sidecar, her silver hair plastered but her gaze fixed forward, a quiet resolve etched in the lines of her face. Behind them, the iron promise thrummed as one, 15 bikes weaving through the curves, exhaust mingling with the ozone tang, a brotherhood bound by more than blood. Big Mike rode shotgun on Trent's flank, his massive form hunched against the spray, signaling with a gloved hand to little Jax, who peeled off to flank the sedan. The chase wasn't overt, no Hollywood pursuit, just the subtle dance of shadows on a rain-slicked road, the wipers on the sedan's windshield slashing like a metronome of tension. Trent's mind raced ahead, piecing the fragments. Harlan's whispered call, the Horizon ties to the mayor's office, the bypassed permits that smelled of backroom deals. This wasn't just a son's betrayal, it was a town's soul bartered for condos and kickbacks, the kind of corruption that festered like rust on a forgotten frame. He'd seen it overseas, leaders selling out the ground they stood on, and vowed then, with Jax's ghost at his side, to ride against it, wherever it reared. The sedan surged closer on a straightaway, its tires hissing on the wet pavement, close enough for Trent to glimpse the silhouette of 2 figures inside, suits rumpled by the weather. Razor's voice crackled over the club's encrypted radio, patched through earpieces hidden under helmets. "Plates confirm Horizon security. Armed likely. We lose 'em at the bridge?" Trent nodded into the wind, the rain stinging his eyes like unshed tears. The old covered bridge loomed ahead, a relic of weathered timber spanning the swollen river below, its arches groaning under years of floods and neglect. The crew accelerated, engines roaring in unison, the sound echoing off the hills like thunder's echo. As they hit the bridge, little Jax gunned it, cutting sharp to block the sedan's path, his bike skidding in a controlled slide that forced the car to brake hard, fishtailing on the slick wood. Water sprayed up in sheets, the river below churning white with foam, carrying the faint briny scent of disturbed earth. Trent glanced back, seeing Mike and Razor peel off to join the blockade, their forms silhouetted against the storm's flash. The sedan reversed, tires smoking, then spun out, slamming into the guardrail with a metallic crunch that reverberated through the rain. No pursuit now. The crew regrouped on the far side, engines idling low as they waited out the deluge under a canopy of dripping oaks. Margot's voice cut through the patter, soft but clear over the radio's hum. "They'll come again. Harlan. He's in too deep. I saw it in his eyes. Fear. Not just for me, but for what he's become." Trent dismounted, helping her from the sidecar, the ground muddy underfoot, sucking at their boots like reluctant truth. The crew circled in, faces streaked with rain, leathers glistening under the sporadic lightning. Big Mike wiped his brow, the toothpick bobbing as he spoke. "We hit the mayor's office next. Quiet recon. Razor's got a contact inside, old army buddy turned clerk. If Horizon's grease in palms, we get it on record." The warehouse welcomed them back like an old friend, its rusted doors creaking open to the warmth of a rekindled fire, the air inside thick with the aroma of damp wool drying and percolating coffee. Shadows danced on the walls from the flames, casting the crew in flickering relief as they stripped off wet gear, the clatter of buckles and zippers punctuating the low murmur of plans. Margot settled near the hearth, the purse on her lap like a talisman, her fingers tracing the locket's chain. Trent knelt beside her, the fire's heat thawing the chill from his bones, but not the resolve in his chest. "You did good back there, ma'am. Standing up to him, that's the promise we all chase. Jax would have said the same." She met his eyes, the blue depths reflecting the flames, worn but unbowed. "Jax, your brother from the war." Trent nodded, the name slipping out like a confession, the first crack in his guarded shell. "Lost him in the sands. Promised I'd carry his fight, stand for the one systems chew up, like you." The words hung, binding them in the quiet, the crew's respectful silence wrapping around the moment like a shared blanket. Little Jax handed out towels, his young face thoughtful, the rain's patter on the tin roof a steady backdrop to the unfolding trust. By evening, as the storm eased to a drizzle, Razor returned from his recon, mud-splattered and triumphant, clutching a flash drive like contraband gold. The group huddled around the scarred table, the fire's glow illuminating scribbled notes and laptop screens, casting blue light on weathered faces. Mayor Ellis pocketed 20 grand from Horizon for fast-tracking the zoning. Harlan's cut was the deed. He forged the power of attorney with a doc on the payroll. Signatures match, but the timestamps? Sloppy. "We leaked this to the press, anonymous tip, and it unravels." His voice was a low rumble, excitement tempered by caution, the scent of printer ink clinging to his hands. Trent leaned back, the chair creaking under him, the weight of the evidence settling like ballast. Corruption's web was mapped now, mayor, developer's son, all threads leading back to the Victorian's stolen heart. But Margot's hand on his arm stayed him. "Not just expose, redeem. Harlan's still my boy. Show him the cost before it breaks him." The plea stirred something deep, an echo of his own ghosts, the promise to Jax not just to fight, but to heal what war and greed had shattered. Nods rippled through the crew. The iron promise wasn't vengeance, but the slow burn of moral fire, lighting paths back from the edge. As night deepened, the warehouse hummed with purpose, phones buzzing with secure calls to allies in the state press, maps marked for tomorrow's careful ride to the mayor's office. Trent stood watch outside, the drizzle misting his face, the distant town lights twinkling like hesitant stars. The black sedan was out there regrouping, but so were they, family chosen in the rain, bound by oaths that outlasted storms. Margot's story had pulled him in, but now it fueled them all, a reminder that gratitude wasn't platitudes over pie, it was the grit to stand, to promise, to ride until the invisible were seen. And in the quiet drip of rain on metal, Trent felt the horizon shift, the real ride just beginning. If this tale of quiet courage stirs something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories of honor and heart reach more lost benches in the night. The night air hung heavy in the warehouse, laced with the lingering bite of rain-soaked earth and the faint, acrid tang of cooling embers from the fire. Flickering lantern light danced across the scarred wooden beams overhead, casting elongated shadows that twisted like unspoken doubts on the concrete floor. Trent paced the length of the room, his boots echoing softly against the damp chill, the weight of the flash drive in his pocket feeling heavier than the chain of dog tags he still wore under his shirt. The crew had dispersed into quiet clusters, some wiping down bikes with oil-stained rags, the rhythmic squeak of leather on chrome, a counterpoint to the low murmur of voices plotting the next move. Margot sat by the hearth, her silhouette small but unyielding, the locket from her purse now open on her lap, its faded photo catching the glow like a captured memory. Big Mike slumped into a folding chair nearby, his broad hands nursing a mug of reheated coffee, steam rising in lazy curls that blurred his weathered features. "Razor's tip to the press goes out at first light," he said, voice gravelly from the storm's roar still echoing in his ears. "Anonymous, clean, no blowback on us, but the mayor's no fool. He'll circle the wagons, call in favors. Harlan's hour in. Get him to flip before it hits the fan." Trent stopped pacing. Leaning against a support beam, the rough wood biting into his palm like a grounding anchor. The evidence burned in his mind. Timestamps mismatched, bank transfers veiled as consulting fees, the mayor's signature on zoning overrides that turned quiet streets into developer playgrounds. It wasn't just Margot's home at stake, it was the Hollow's heart. The simple lives bartered for high-rises that no one needed. Margot looked up, her eyes reflecting the lantern's warm amber, lines of fatigue softened by the resolve that had taken root since the bench. Flipping him, that's more than exposure. It's pulling him back from the brink. Her voice carried the quiet ache of a mother who'd planted seeds only to watch them twist in the wind. But there was steel beneath it now, forged in the ride through the rain. Trent knelt beside her, the scent of lavender from her handkerchief mingling with the warehouse's musty depth. "We give him the chance, ma'am. Iron promise don't just break chains. We offer the road out. Jax taught me that before the sands took him. A man can redeem if he chooses the promise over the profit." The crew stirred as Razor returned from the corner office they'd rigged with a salvaged desk and laptop, his lanky frame silhouetted against the screen's blue glow. He slid the device across the table, the keys clicking like final judgments. Emails queued. State papers got a reporter hungry for small-town rot, ex-military, smells a story. But we need Harlan's confession on tape, voluntary. Ride to his place at dawn, before the suits lock him down. Nods rippled through the group, little Jax cracking his knuckles with a sound like distant thunder, his young face etched with the same fire that had claimed Trent years ago. The air thickened with purpose, the faint hum of a generator underscoring their bond, a family chosen in the glow of lanterns, oaths whispered over engines and embers. Dawn broke grey and reluctant over Eldridge Hollow, the sky a bruised canvas, streaked with the promise of clearing, mist rising from the river like ghosts, reluctant to fade. Trent led the smaller group, himself, Mike, Razor and little Jax, on a hushed ride through the waking streets, engines muffled to a low purr that blended with the morning's hush. Margot stayed behind at the warehouse, safe with the watch, her parting words a soft echo in Trent's helmet. "Bring him home, if you can." The hillside road wound upward, dew-kissed pines whispering secrets to the wind, the air crisp with the scent of wet bark and distant wood smoke from early risers stoking hearths. Harlan's ranch house emerged from the mist like a fortress under siege, its windows dark save for a single light in the study, flickering like a trapped firefly. They parked at the tree line, dismounting with the stealth of men who'd learned silence in shadowed valleys far from home. Trent approached alone first, his boots silent on the dew-slick grass, heart steady as the thrum of his pulse. The door opened before he reached it. Harlan's face gaunt in the porch light, eyes hollowed by a night of unraveling conscience. No suits flanked him now. The black sedan was nowhere in sight, but the tension hung like fog, thick and unyielding. "Trent," Harlan said, voice cracking like dry leather, stepping aside without invitation. The house smelled of stale coffee and regret, papers scattered across the kitchen table like fallen leaves, deeds, emails. The web of his choices laid bare. Trent entered, the crew fanning out to the perimeter, watchful shadows beyond the windows. "I know why you're here. The call last night. Horizon's panicking. They threatened everything. My job, the new life." His hands trembled as he poured coffee, the liquid sloshing, mirroring the storm in his gaze. Trent sat across from him, unyielding but open. The dog tags cool against his chest. "Threats don't erase what you did, Harlan, but they explain it. Your ma sat crying on a bench while you signed her away. That's the chain you forged. Break it now, or it drags you under." Harlan sank into a chair, the wood creaking under his weight, his fingers tracing a forged document like a map to his own ruin. The room filled with the tick of a wall clock, each second a pause for the truth to surface. Outside, rain began again, a soft patter on the roof that amplified the intimacy of the moment. "I told myself it was mercy," he whispered, the confession spilling like the downpour. She was slipping, forgetting things. But it was the money, the easy out. Horizon promised security, but now they're coming for loose ends. Tears tracked his face, not from fear alone, but from the raw peel of self-deception, the sun glimpsing the mother he'd buried under ambition. Trent pulled the recorder from his pocket, sliding it across the table, its lens a quiet eye. "Say it for her, for the town. We got the evidence. This seals it. Choose the promise you owe her, the one from boyhood, not the boardroom." Harlan hesitated, the rain intensifying. Thunder rumbling low like an approaching convoy. Then, with a nod that broke something deep, he leaned in, voice steadying as the words flowed, the coercion, the kickbacks, the mayor's nod over whiskey. The tape captured it all, clean and irrefutable, a redemption etched in audio waves. As they rode back, the recorder secure, the mist lifting to reveal patches of blue sky, Trent felt the shift, a knot loosening in the chest he'd armored for years. Harlan followed in his own truck, trailing the bikes like a prodigal shadow, the first step toward mending. The warehouse came into view, engines echoing off its walls, and Margot waited at the door, her figure small against the vastness. The reunion was quiet. No grand embraces, just a shared glance that spoke volumes. The purse set aside as Harlan knelt, apologies murmured like prayers. The crew watched from the edges, the air warming with the scent of fresh coffee brewing. The iron promises fire rekindled not in flames, but in the subtle grace of choices reclaimed. But the web wasn't fully unraveled. Whispers from Razor's contact hinted at Horizon's last play, a rushed meeting at the town hall, suits circling to bury the story before it broke. Trent gathered the full crew as noon approached, the sun breaking through in golden shafts that pierced the warehouse gloom. Maps unfurled, plans solidified, infiltrate the meeting, deliver the tape anonymously, let the truth ride out on its own thunder. Margot stood with them now, Harlan at her side, the family pieced not by blood alone, but by the honor of standing tall. In the hum of engines warming outside, Trent gripped the throttle, the horizon calling once more, a promise fulfilled. One quiet mile from invisibility to unbreakable light. The sun hung high over Eldridge Hollow by midday, its rays slicing through the lingering mist like blades of judgment, illuminating the town hall's weathered facade in stark relief. The building stood at the heart of the square, a squat relic of red brick and white columns, its clock tower chiming noon with a toll that echoed off the surrounding shops and the river's gentle murmur below. The air carried the crisp bite of post-rain earth, mingled with the faint, oily scent of idling engines from delivery trucks and the distant tang of fresh-baked bread from the corner bakery. But beneath the holiday afterglow normalcy, Tension coiled like a spring. Horizon Build's black sedans lined the curb, their polished hoods gleaming ominously, while suited figures huddled under the awning, briefcases clutched like shields. Trent led the convoy from the warehouse's shadow, the iron promises bikes rolling in a tight formation that turned heads in the quiet streets. 15 strong now, with Harlan's truck bringing up the rear, its bed loaded with quiet resolve rather than cargo. The engines thrummed low, a purposeful growl that vibrated through Trent's grip on the handlebars, the leather of his gloves creaking softly against the throttle. Margot rode with him again, her presence in the sidecar a steady anchor, her hand resting lightly on the edge as if drawing strength from the chrome. Harlan followed close, his face set in the rear view, the tape's confession burning a hole in his jacket pocket, a fragile bridge between ruin and repair. The crew had swelled with purpose. Even the warehouse watch joined, faces etched with the shared oath that bound them, not by birthrights, but by the scars of battles won and lost. Big Mike rode point beside Trent, his bulk cutting the wind like a prow, signaling turns with subtle nods. Town Hall's got back entrances. Service door by the loading dock. Razor and Little Jack slip in first, plant the drive in the AV room. We hold the front, draw eyes. His voice crackled over the radio, steady as the river's flow, laced with the gravel of a man who'd stared down worse than corrupt suits. Trent nodded into the breeze, the wind tugging at his hair, carrying whispers of pine from the nearby woods. This ride wasn't Fury's charge. It was precision's promise. The kind Jax had drilled into him under starless skies. Strike true, leave the field to the light. Corruption had woven its threads through the mayor's office, turning public trust into private gain, but the iron promise would unravel it with evidence, not echoes of violence. They parked in the square's shadow, engines cutting to silence that amplified the murmur of gathering locals, curious townsfolk drawn by rumors of a zoning emergency meeting, and their faces a mix of confusion and holiday-weary indifference. The scent of coffee from a nearby cart wafted over, grounding the surreal tension as the crew dismounted, leathers whispering against denim. Margot stepped out, her wool coat returned and mended, hanging straight, dignity radiating like the sun's warmth on her silver hair. Harlan hung back, eyes scanning the sedans, the weight of his choice pressing like the tape in his pocket. "I hand it off inside," he murmured to Trent, voice low. "For her. For what I almost lost." Trent clapped his shoulder, the contact brief but binding, a silent vow exchanged in the open air. Razor and Little Jax melted into the crowd first, their lanky and compact forms blending with the flow toward the hall's main doors, flanked by stone steps worn smooth by generations of decisions both noble and rotten. The air inside the vestibule hit cool and musty, carrying the faint polish of oak paneling and the sharper edge of printer ink from stacked agendas. Whispers rippled as they passed security, a bored guard nodding them through, oblivious to the flash drives slipping into a coat pocket like contraband hope. Down a dim corridor, past portraits of stern-faced mayors, they reached the AV room, its door ajar, the hum of equipment a low drone. Razor worked fast, fingers dancing over cables, embedding the file into the meeting's projector loop. Confessions, transfers, the mayor's whiskey-slurred approvals, cued to play at the push of a button. Outside, the square filled, the crew forming a loose perimeter near the steps, their presence a subtle wall of leather and resolve that parted the suit's wary glances. Trent stood with Margot at the edge, her hand on his arm, the crowd's murmur swelling like an approaching wave. Horizon's men paced, phones pressed to ears, their cologne cloying in the breeze, but doubt flickered in their eyes. The bikers' quiet vigil a reminder that the Hollow's roots ran deeper than developer blueprints. Big Mike loomed nearby, toothpick shifting as he scanned the doors, the sun casting long shadows that danced like unspoken alliances. The meeting doors swung open at one. spilling attendees into the hall's main chamber, a vaulted room of polished floors and tiered seats, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee urns and the underlying staleness of bureaucracy. Mayor Ellis took the podium, his paunch straining against an ill-fitting suit, voice booming platitudes about progress for Eldridge Hollow. Horizon reps nodded from the front row, briefcases at their feet like buried secrets. Trent guided Margot to seats in the back, Harlan sliding in beside her, the family's reunion a quiet anchor amid the rising tide of speeches. The crew dotted the rows, eyes sharp, the weight of their bond humming beneath the surface, as the mayor droned on, zoning approvals, vital developments that masked the rot. Razor's signal buzzed in Trent's earpiece. Live in 5. Tension coiled, the room's air growing heavier, laced with the faint creak of chairs and the rustle of agendas. Harlan's hand trembled on the armrest, but Margot's steady gaze held him, a mother's promise pulling him through. Then the projector flickered, the screen behind the podium blooming to life, not slides of condos, but Harlan's voice, clear and unyielding. I forged the power of attorney. Horizon paid the mayor 20 grand to fast-track it all. Gasps rippled through the chamber, the mayor's face draining to ash as bank records scrolled, timestamps glaring like indictments. Chaos erupted, shouts from suits, the mayor's gavel slamming futilely, locals rising with murmurs turning to outrage. Horizon men bolted for exits, but the crew's presence blocked paths, not with force, but with the unmovable wall of witnessed truth. Trent stood, helping Margot to her feet, the room's clamor fading to a triumphant roar in his ears. Outside, sirens wailed distant, state investigators, tipped by the press release that had gone live with the tape. The web shattered, threads of greed snapping under the light of exposure, the Victorian's deed reclaimed in the fallout, Eldridge Hollow's soul breathing free. As the crowd spilled into the square, sunlight bathing faces in relief, Trent watched Harlan embrace his mother, the gesture raw and real, tears mixing with the day's warmth. The iron promise gathered their bikes, engines stirring like a victory hymn, the air alive with cheers and the scent of justice's fresh dawn. Margot turned to Trent, her eyes shining. You gave us back more than a home. He nodded, the dog tags warm against his chest. Jax's promise fulfilled in this quiet triumph, but in the horizon's glow, Trent knew the ride never truly ended. Oaths like theirs echoed on, binding the chosen family against whatever shadows lingered. The hollow stood taller, gratitude etched not in feasts, but in the unbreakable honor of standing seen. The square pulsed with the aftershocks of revelation, sunlight fracturing through the dispersing clouds like shards of reclaimed truth, casting a mosaic of light across the cobblestones worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The air hummed with voices, outraged locals clustering in knots, their murmurs rising like steam from the river's banks, laced with the sharp tang of coffee from overturned urns and the earthy residue of rain-dampened brick. Sirens wailed closer now, state cruisers slicing through the crowd with flashing blues that painted faces in stark contrasts of relief and reckoning. Mayor Ellis was led away in cuffs, his suit rumpled, the gavel forgotten on the podium like a discarded scepter. Horizon's suits scattered like leaves in a gust, briefcases abandoned, their polished world cracking under the weight of exposed ledgers. Trent stood at the edge of the fray, his leather cut still damp from the morning's mist, the faint scent of motor oil and pine clinging to him like a badge of the miles ridden. Margot leaned against him, her arm linked through his, the wool of her coat brushing his sleeve with a warmth that spoke of battles won without a single raised fist. Harlan hovered nearby, his face a map of fresh lines, regret etched deep but lifted by the tentative bridge of his mother's nod. The Iron Promise crew formed a loose circle around them, bikes gleaming in the sun like silent guardians, engines cooling with soft ticks that punctuated the chaos. Big Mike wiped sweat from his brow, his massive frame a pillar amid the swirl, toothpick shifting as he scanned the scene. "Truth's a hell of a rider," he rumbled, clapping little Jax on the back, the young man's grin breaking through the tension like dawn after storm. The crowd parted as investigators approached, notebooks in hand, their boots crunching on scattered agendas that fluttered like confetti of downfall. A lead detective, grizzled with a badge that echoed the crew's own scars, nodded to Trent. "Anonymous tip saved us months. That tape, airtight, the deeds reversing. Mrs. Hale, your home's yours again by week's end." Margot's breath caught, her free hand rising to the locket at her throat, fingers tracing its worn edges as if feeling the pulse of lost years returning. No words at first, just the quiet press of tears she didn't hide, the sun warming her silver hair into a halo of quiet victory. Harlan stepped forward then, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "It was me on the tape. I made it right. For her." The detective's eyes softened, jotting notes, the air between them thick with the unspoken mercy of second chances. As the officials moved on, corralling the last of Horizon's fleeing threads, the square began to empty, locals drifting back to lives interrupted but unbroken. Whispers of thanks rippled toward the bikers. A farmer tipping his hat, a shopkeeper pressing a warm pie into Razor's hands, the scent of cinnamon cutting through the fading adrenaline. Trent felt the pull of it all, the way this detour from a lonely ride had woven into something larger. A tapestry of promises kept, not in grand gestures, but in the grit of showing up. Jax's dog tags shifted against his chest, a cool reminder of the oath that started it all, the vow to stand for the voiceless, to forge family from the fragments war and world left behind. Margot turned to him, her blue eyes clear now, reflecting the sky's widening blue. "Trent Navarro, you saw me when the town looked away. That's the real feast, not tables, but this. Gratitude in the bone." He nodded, the roughness in his throat easing into a rare smile, the wind carrying the distant low of engines, stirring elsewhere in the hollow. Perhaps other rides, other calls. The crew mounted up slowly, the symphony of keys turning and throttles easing to life, a hymn of closure. Harlan helped Margot toward his truck. The gesture awkward but earnest, their conversation a low murmur lost to the breeze, words of repair, of gardens to replant and locks to refit. "We'll start slow," he said, audible in the pause. "The house, then us." She squeezed his hand, the purse left behind at the warehouse now just a relic, its secrets diffused into light. Trent swung onto his Harley last, the seat warm from the sun. The handlebars familiar under calloused palms. Big Mike revved beside him, the vibration thrumming through the ground like a shared heartbeat. "Ride home, brothers," Trent called, voice carrying over the rumble. "But remember, promises don't end at dawn." The convoy peeled out, weaving through the square's lingering echoes, the river sparkling below, as if washing clean the stains of greed. Eldridge Hollow stretched ahead, its streets alive with the quiet rhythm of lives reclaiming their course. No condos scarring the skyline, just the Victorian on Maple waiting, its porch light soon to welcome back its keeper. Miles later, as the warehouse came into view, its rusted silhouette a beacon against the afternoon gold, Trent throttled down, the engine's growl fading to a contented purr. The crew dismounted in the gravel lot, the air rich with the aroma of fresh brewed stew simmering inside, a simple meal shared among the chosen. Margot and Harlan arrived moments later, the truck's door creaking open to the group's nods. No fanfare, just the easy space of bonds reforged. Around the fire that evening, stories flowed like the river. Tales of benches and betrayals turned to triumphs, laughter mingling with the crackle of flames. Razor strummed a battered guitar, notes low and wandering, while little Jacks passed around mugs, steam rising like lifted burdens. In the quiet hours, as stars pricked the velvet sky, Trent stepped outside, the cool night air brushing his face with hints of frost and freedom. The hollow lay peaceful below, lights winking in windows where families gathered, invisible chains broken. Jax's promise echoed in the silence, fulfilled not in glory, but in the subtle honor of a ride that made the forgotten seen. Gratitude, he realized, was this: the open road ahead, family at your back, and the unyielding vow to ride on for the lost, the loyal, the light that outlasted storms. If these tales of quiet honor touch your road, subscribe for more stories that ride the line between shadow and dawn. We thank you from the Hollow's heart for joining the promise.